Hello everyone. In this video we're going to be discussing a different costing methodology that accountants can use to keep track of the manufacturing costs of the products that they are making, and it is called process costing. At this point in the semester you've seen job order costing, the system that is used by companies that make very small quantities of unique distinguishable items. So it's very easy to track how much cost went into any one particular job or product line that they are making. Process costing is used by the opposite type of companies that do a different type of manufacturing. It is used by companies that manufacture homogeneous products, where they mass produce a large amount of products which are exactly identical to one another. There's nothing custom about any of these products. And when they manufacture them, they do so through a series of uniform steps or processes. Think an assembly line. There's got to be one phase of production that has to be completed before the next phase of production can begin. The first company I have here is Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola does not complete one bottle at a time. It doesn't even complete one case of soda at a time and then package it and sell it to somebody. They mass produce millions upon millions of bottles at any one given time, through a series of steps, which I'll get to on the next slide, but they would definitely use process costing. Coke is manufactured very much in an organized and easy to follow process, repeated steps over and over again. Most companies that would use process costing manufacture in a way that's similar to Coke. They make millions upon millions of units at any one given time. They're going to have large batches of units which are not completely done and ready to be sold because they're mass producing such a large quantity at a time. And the product that they make is pretty small and cheap to purchase, impulse items, if you will. All the companies like that will use process costing, but it doesn't necessarily mean that process costing can only be used by companies that are making millions of dollars of things that sell for $1 or $2 a pop. Companies that make very expensive items can also use process costing, because what's important is not the size or the quantity that you're producing. It's that all of your products are incredibly similar or homogeneous, and that the way that it's produced is in a series of uniform steps. So you'll have different processes, departments, etc. through the production process. And a good example of a company that doesn't make millions upon millions of units, but all of their units are exactly the same, and they are always made with the same series of uniform steps, is Airbus. Before I got into teaching, I worked in the aerospace industry. That plane that is sitting there in that picture is an Airbus A320. I've worked on plenty of them from all sorts of different carriers. I've been on an Air Canada A320. I've been on a Virgin A320. I've been on a JetBlue A320. The only thing that's different between the different airline carriers' version of the A320 is the paint on the outside, the type of upholstery the seats are wrapped in, and what carpet is on the inside. Like, they're exactly the same exact planes as far as the shell of the actual plane goes. And they're made in the same series of steps. They put the frame on, they put the fuselage, the outside, on the plane afterwards. They attach the wings, and finally they put the nose on, which has all the guidance and fancy electrical stuff that they need in the front. So even though they're not making a million Airbus A320s, the ones that they do make are homogeneous. They're all the same. The finishing steps of making a plane look like a certain airline carrier's particular brand is after the plane is done being produced. And they're always put together in the same order. So Airbus could use process costing, and I'm sure that they do when they make all of their different individual plane lines. For Coke, going back to Coke, how is their product made? Well, they have a series of processes they go through, and each phase of production has to be completed before the next phase of production can begin. I took this information right from Coke's 10K report, and they state that their process for manufacturing Coke is to first treat the water. You can't be selling Coke to people and giving them malaria. That would not be good. So they take in batches of water, which are tested and treated for any abnormalities, and they are corrected through, if there is something wrong, it's corrected through using naturally dissolvable salts. It's through chemicals that are going to purify it. And in the process of doing so, of treating and making sure water is safe, that phase of production has its own unique cost. You have direct materials cost and all of the chemicals that are needed to test the water, and the salts, etc., that are needed to make the water Sanitary, you have direct labor costs in terms of the salaries of the technicians, which are doing all of this testing to make sure that the water is safe to be made into Coke. And I'm sure you have overhead costs for all of the depreciation on the machinery that they are using, on the, property taxes, etc., of the facility that water is being treated at. There's all sorts of unique costs which you can track that are specific just to that phase of production. And you'll incur all those costs turning untreated water into water that's been treated and ready to be made into Coke. And after you have water that is ready to go, you're not bottling up water and selling it unless it's Aquafina. If you're going to convert it to Coke, you need to convert some of that water into a syrup, which gives it the Coke color, taste, etc. So at that point, with the water being properly treated, all of the costs of that first phase of production will be incurred and it'll be done. And the water treatment department, step in the process, will transfer all of those costs off to the second step in the process, the second department, the syrup production department, where they'll add their own unique costs, the costs of all of the sugars, syrup, coloring, etc., to turn humongous barrels of treated water into humongous barrels of Coca-Cola syrup. And with all those extra costs that go in there, they will be added on top of all the costs that were transferred in from the water treatment department. And now we have a running tally of how much that particular batch of Coke is costing us to produce. No one is ever going to go out and say, can I get a 50-gallon drum of Coca-Cola, please? Like, we buy those things in individual little bottles. So the last phase of production is to turn those humongous barrels of finished Coke into the manner in which we buy them, cans, bottles, 2 liters, etc., the filling and production phase, the last phase of production, where they take those huge barrels of syrup and they put them into millions upon millions of plastic or maybe glass bottles or aluminum cans. They have all of the branding, printed logo, etc. put on there. There's unique costs there, the costs of the operators who run the machines, the cost of the aluminum, glass, plastic, etc. that goes into making the bottles, the cost of the labels has its own overhead costs that are tracked. All of those costs will be added on top of all the costs which were transferred in from the prior phases of production. And when these bottles of Coke are done being filled and they're put into, cubes or 6-packs or however they're going to sell them, you will have a running record that has kept track of all of the costs necessary to turn what was water into a finished product for Coca-Cola. So in the process costing system, you're essentially just carrying costs through the line and always transferring out costs from one phase of production to the next phase of production when it's done. And after syrup's done being produced, you will transfer the costs of both of the previous phases of production to the filling department. And when the filling department is done, all of those costs will get transferred to finished goods. So we have a methodology here to track. And we're going to do this on a thing called a process costing report. For our example today, we're going to be using the fictitious Chew Easy Peanut Butter Company, who turns raw peanuts into jarred and delicious peanut butter. In my ground classes, I typically show this video from how it's made for peanut butter. It's probably not a good idea to embed one YouTube video inside of another YouTube video, but I will post a link, so please watch this video so you have an idea of the steps that are going on, like a visual representation of their process for turning raw peanuts into finished peanut butter.